Hello and welcome to Talking Events, the industry podcast brought to you by Event Industry News. Our thanks, first of all, before we kick off with today's episode, to Headbox.com. Headbox.com have kindly organised the venue that we're sat in today and that we've set the podcast studio up in, which is the Shangri-La Hotel at the Shard, London. We're in a private meeting room on level 34 of the Shard, overlooking London. I mean, it's a fabulous location to be in. So thanks to all of those guys, and particularly to Claire Metcalf and her events and hospitality team here at the hotel for looking after us today. On with today's episode, and we're going to be looking again, I suppose, in a way at the subject of hospitality, and how that is being developed and how things are changing in the event industry. And I'm delighted to say that joining Talking Events for the first time is the founder of Event Wine Solutions, Paul Scaife. Paul, thanks very much for joining us.
You're welcome.
Great to have you on the show. First of all, we've met several times in the past and have spoken, but for the benefit of those people who may not be familiar with Event Wine Solutions, tell us a little bit about the company and what it does.
Yeah, well, after a 30-year wine background, I found a bottle format that I really liked the look of at an exhibition in Montpellier about 5 years ago. And it struck me that there was an opportunity to use some of my experience in blending and working with wine producers in France to actually put some interesting wines in this new bottle format, which is PET, fully recyclable, multi-layered for extra length of life, and bring it to the events industry.
So this is fundamentally wine in we call it a PET bottle is the correct term, but it's a plastic bottle,
Yeah, it's a
isn't it?
plastic bottle, but the technology behind it means that the consumer sees effectively a quality wine bottle that is virtually indistinguishable against glass until they actually pick it up and squeeze it.
The benefits are obvious, but let's go through them. Let's ask the question why. Why bring this solution to the events industry in particular?
Well, we've seen an increase in licensing authorities clamping down on glass on sites at events, and this is a real solution. And if bar operators and promoters are being asked to reduce the risks of injury, both to event attendees, but also to bar staff operators by having glass on site, then this PET solution really does the job.
Is this just simply a case of providing any old wine in a plastic bottle?
I wouldn't be able to sleep at night if I would put any old wine in this plastic bottle. I entertain at home, and I want to put wines on the table for my friends that I'm proud of. I've had a long wine trade experience, but now in the events industry, I think I can put that to good use by sourcing, blending, tweaking wine blends with winemakers on site in France to bring some really interesting wine quality into this bottle format.
When it comes to the catering at outdoor events and music festivals, we use that as an example, we've really seen a step up in the levels being offered, haven't we, at festivals. In most other aspects, we've seen a big resurgence in cask ales and real ales. Yeah. We've seen the rise of trendy street food and gourmet burgers and better quality food than your traditional old greasy burger van that we would have had at a festival 15, 20 years ago. Is the area of wine still something that is trying to be tackled by event organisers, or are you trying to sort of push this message out there a little bit more effectively than perhaps they've looked at it in the past?
Well, I'd be lying if I didn't say I wasn't pushing it hard, but actually I think it's being pulled by the consumer itself. So, we see just in the last 3 weeks, the Sunday supplements are full of stories of street food and the amazing choice of beverage offer at festivals and events. And I think that the consumer's starting to demand that their experience in the local gastro pub maybe is reflected by what they're actually getting on site at a festival. We've got to remember that because of the recession, a lot of really high quality chefs found rents difficult, and with property prices still continuing to rise, they needed to find an outlet for their hugely creative food, and I think that part of the reason that you're seeing a lot better and more interesting street food at festivals and events now is a result of that. Great chefs taking their brand out into the events market for consumers' benefit.
But as you rightly point out, consumers themselves have become more discerning with their tastes and what they wish to eat, what they wish to drink, what they wish to experience. And when we look at modern day outdoor events and again music festivals as an example, people are going to them for the experience, aren't they? And you ask any festival organizer, the demographic of has changed massively, hasn't it, from 10 years ago? The people that were going to music festivals 10 years ago is a vastly different group of people to the people that you would now see walking around a greenfield location, and hand in hand in that with that is going to be a change in taste, isn't there, and a change in demand of what they want when they're there.
Absolutely, yeah. It's quite interesting. There's a statistic out of the Association of Independent Festivals that 58% of people now actually don't go for headline acts when they're buying festival tickets and choosing their event that they attend. So if we actually look at that, that means that the consumer's going for the whole arts experience, spoken word, lighting in the woods, fantastic banquet experience, great cask ales, gin bars, cocktails, and I feel wine, which is lagged behind.
In what respect does it lag behind? I mean, is it just a case that simply there's been no thought given to it other than red, white, maybe rosé, chuck it in a glass and hand it out? We've obviously most people will be familiar with single serving bottles. Is it now gone beyond that, where people don't just want red, white, or rosé?
Well, I think if what people are looking to replicate at an event is something similar to their experience of dining in the city, then what they're used to buying when they do that is a full bottle of wine. And up until now, of course, the PET offer has been small single serves, red, white, possibly rosé, as you say. But my company exists to try and actually expand that range and give consumers a real choice of wine that perhaps more closely matches what they actually do in real life.
And when you say that not just closely matches their tastes, but culturally, there is a significant difference, isn't there, between handling a full bottle of wine and taking that back to the table with your guests or your friends, whoever you're sitting with, compared to sticking down a couple of cheap plastic glasses of it that have been tipped out in front of you.
Yeah, absolutely. Part of the wine drinking ritual, I feel, is pouring for your friends, out of a full bottle. It's what we do. It's a shared emotional experience, and if we can do that and replicate that much more accurately by having bar operators being able to hand over the bottle to the consumer at the festival and say, go and enjoy this with your friends, and if you like it, can buy a second one, then I think that's where we need to be.
How receptive has the industry been thus far to what you're trying to promote and what you're trying to do with Event Wine Solutions? And let's perhaps look at that in two different strands. Let's look at the event organisers and promoters themselves, and some of the bar operators that inevitably you're going to have to deal with when it comes to the larger events.
Yeah, well, looking at the event organisers themselves, I think very often they were taking their lead on product selection from the bar operators. So the bar operators would put a package of products to them across the whole composite drinks menu, and with their financial arrangements in place, the event organisers would be prepared to accept that. I think there's been one major change in the last 18 months, and that is that I think that the bar operators are now in a much better place to be able to source wholesale-wise a much wider variety of brands and products, and so the consumers benefited from those bar operators being able to provide a much wider range and much closer to what the consumers are looking for, rather than the traditional offers made to the event organisers. And so, yeah, we see a big drift away from 187ml, which is the small baby bottles in plastic, towards a demand for a wider range of wines in full bottle plastic format, and that's why we've had to bring a lot more wines to market to cope for VIP and hospitality areas where those consumers are willing to pay more to get a closer experience to dining out that they do regularly.
Which is, and the hospitality and the higher level hospitality is now a huge part of the bottom line, isn't it, of a festival, being able to offer a more bespoke and tailored offering to a smaller niche group of people who are prepared to pay more for something is a critical part, isn't it, of modern day events.
Yeah, and a good example of that is the demand we're seeing for our mid and upper range wines this season. when I first started, we had, red, white, and rosé in full-size plastic bottles, but now we've got a range of wines that includes New Zealand's Sauvignon, Pinot Noir, Malbec. We even put white Burgundy in a bottle. Our Macon Village would expect to sell at around £35 at a festival site, and that's much closer to the sort of drinking experience that you'd get in a decent restaurant.
I'm looking at some information here that was published on the Telegraph regarding our wine consumption and just how much we are now consuming in the UK. Just looking through this, I think we jumped last year. Let's have a look here. Britain jumped 2.4% to 12.9 million hectolitres of wine last year. Based on that consumption and our clear love for it now as a country, and the fact that we have become a bit more sophisticated with it, by not identifying those tastes, our promoters and event organisers essentially missing out on revenue, let's be honest with it.
Yeah, I think that's right. And I would honestly say that both the event organisers and the bar operators were certainly slow to recognise my proposition to them in the early stages of the company. But I think that we're now seeing an exponential demand from the consumer, and that's being very quickly responded to by my clients, certainly for a wider range of wines that are hopefully going to more closely match what they're looking for.
When we look at the hospitality that has to go hand in hand with improving the quality of food and beverage that's on offer at any given event, is it important, and have you had examples where you've worked with festivals and outdoor events on the hospitality and how the actual wine is delivered? Because by improving the quality and the choice that's on offer to the customer, with wine you would also expect that the level of service that you receive with that goes up as well. Is it important that the bar operators, the staff who are actually delivering the product itself, are knowledgeable about it in the same way that they would be in a restaurant and that people would expect when they go into a restaurant?
Let's be perfectly honest about it. A lot of younger people preferred drink might not be wine. And so with that in mind, it's unlikely that they're very familiar with how to handle and present wine in a hospitality environment. They're there basically to deliver what the customer wants. So one of the things we've been doing this year is introducing a program of staff incentives based on knowledge. We give our bar operators some knowledge about the products for them to pass on to their staff, and we go to the festival sites and reward members of staff. But if they can actually answer some questions correctly about the quality and the style of the wines that are for sale. And as a result, the staff members hopefully will pick up a little bit more information, be able to relay that in a confident manner to the consumer, and win a bottle of wine sent to their home address for the privilege.
How does the supply chain side of things work with yourself? Because you are sourcing the wine, from the very start, from the manufacturers of the wine itself. Yeah,
our French wines are chosen by me directly in source, and I oversee the bottling process. We obviously have New World wines as well. Those are bulk tanked and over to the UK and bottled in the UK. And so again, I get the opportunity to select those wines, and that's really important to me because I've already bored you with my 30-year wine trade background, but the reality to me is that what we're going to be doing here is giving people perhaps their first and only opportunity to pick up a plastic bottle. And when I set my company up, we did some focus groups where we described wine in a plastic bottle to people, and the response was essentially quite negative. They weren't expecting the wine quality to be very good. They didn't expect the packaging to be very interesting, and they overall felt that perhaps it wasn't a sustainable business proposition. But as they started to encounter the products that I was bringing to market, they started to see some real benefits in this, and that led me to have confidence in driving the project forward.
And where does the supply chain then go from there? Do you supply directly to the events themselves for them to then provide to their bar operators? Do you supply to the bar operators? How does it work, or does it vary?
It does vary because we have a very strong national wholesale route to market, which can supply the major bar operators, which will take us into some very big events. But we actually really like trading directly with some of the smaller events and festivals, because without that consumer feedback, we don't feel that we can assess the quality and range that we provide in a way that to actually take the business forward. Because I think that actually some of the smaller independent festivals are actually starting to pull some of the larger events up to their sometimes slightly eccentric but wonderfully creative.
No, you're right, yeah.
Wonderfully creative product that they put out there.
Well, you mentioned the Association of Independent Festivals and one of their reports and a statistic from there, and I know from speaking to them in the past that they're very proud of the fact that the example set by some of their smaller member festivals are actually being looked at by some of the larger quote-unquote corporate festivals, and the way that they're doing things, whether that be through hospitality or the creative process, is actually being looked upon. So are there any great examples where you've really been able to engage with some of these smaller festivals and they've actually helped you in terms of developing the product further from either feedback from customers? Have you had some really receptive ones that you think they're the type of guys that I really want to be working with?
Absolutely. My first festival client 4 years ago was the Llama Tree Festival, and James and Julia down there certainly did a fantastic job of making my products feel very welcome, initially in a cautious way, because they weren't too sure how their festival goers were going to receive that. But this year, we'll have 8 wines in there, with a page in the program talking about food and wine matches. So, for example, why not try our new Viognier from southern France, which is an elegant, fragrant wine with a Goan fish curry, and that's the sort of openness that we get from the smaller festivals, and the consumer can benefit from that by saying, well, yeah, let's try this Malbec with a 30-year-old, 30 days aged, steak sandwich from Aberdeen Angus or a rare breed. I think that's a lot of fun.
This is obviously all contributing to a higher level of hospitality and a higher level of offering to the customer at the festival or the event. Is there actually a financial benefit to looking at this type of product? Is there a revenue stream that's untapped by festivals and outdoor events at the moment that could be exploited, for want of a better word, with a product like this?
Well, if we look back at the basic red, white, rosé premise that we started with, that if you're given a lot of choice of real ales, doesn't actually fill a wine lover or a wine consumer with a lot of confidence. But by having mid-range and premium wines on the same wine tariff board, then they perhaps are given the impression that wine selection has been quite carefully made by the bar provider, and they feel more confident by trading up. So by trading up, there's more revenue, there's more cash take, margin generates more profit, and hopefully both the bar operator, but perhaps even more importantly, the festival organizer or promoter can see the benefits of that. I do believe that it's an untapped market there and ready to be pushed forward.
I know that you're heavily involved with the National Outdoor Event Association, with NOAA, and just to go off track ever so slightly, I'm curious to know whether or not there are any. Are there active discussions about the level of hospitality in outdoor events in general, and how suppliers, contractors, organisers can all work a little bit better to improve the level of hospitality? Is it something that's often talked about?
Well, I certainly think that one thing that perhaps isn't talked about quite enough is the profitability of events. And since I entered the industry from outside, I've noticed that a lot of the organisations don't tend to talk too much about where the revenue comes from. They do tend to talk a lot about health and safety, which is critically important, of course, on site. But that the national organisations sometimes, I think, could benefit from actually looking where the money comes from, essentially. And we all know that without ticket sales or good bar revenues, then a lot of events might not take place or be as successful as they are. And so when I was elected to the Council of National Outdoor Events Association, I put that forward as my mandate, wanting to try and link in between NOAA and some of my bar operator clients to try and bring them together more to discuss about how we can move together to create a more profitable events industry. Sadly, we still see in EIN and other publications festivals falling by the wayside through lack of ticket sales or problems with licensing or difficulties actually putting together their event that happened very successfully previously, and consequently disappointing some of their most loyal clients. And I think profitability, perhaps a dirty word to some in the festival industry, is really important.
You have to make money to survive, don't
Yeah.
you? And perhaps not enough people out there are paying attention to some of the finer details that would affect the bottom line profit, and bring it up by selling more of a premium product or making better profit on a mid-range product by comparison. What are the future plans when we're looking at festivals now and how they are embracing it and the people that you are working with? Am I right in saying that some of these have gone to the stage now where they're going to have their own brands on some of the bottles, and there are those sort of offerings now creeping in?
Well, one of the things that we did develop with the Llama Tree Festival was a bespoke package for them. We literally hand label Llama Tree wines, which is the house offer there, as indeed we do for the delightful Cornbury Festival, and those are two really pet clients of ours, and we love working with them. I think that festivals do have an eye to making sure that their own brand is in front of their consumer as much as possible, and I think that's important. But sometimes there's also a need to reassure consumers by having a wide range of other products available, as well as the house wines, which is where our range extension perhaps this year will be quite interesting to see how well that's received by the likes of Cornbury and Llama Tree.
We've mentioned food and quite rightly wine. Are there any other aspects that are being looked at by festivals and outdoor events at the moment that they're looking to just bring the standard up a little bit, where in the past they may have just been happy with one offering and now they're thinking, hold on, the changing consumer taste is driving us to look a little bit more? You mentioned stuff, gin bars. Wine is obviously something that is on the up. Real ale and cask ales is something. Are there any other aspects that you've seen that you think that they're clearly looking in the same way as we've done with wine?
Well, I think that the creativity is really important to a lot of festival goers now. Certainly, when I walk through the wonderful woodland and see lots of twinkly lights and a spoken word shed in a corner somewhere, I think that's wonderful, and that's the sort of thing that you've been seeing in the smaller festivals, but you're also really now starting to see in the larger festivals. And so I think that more creative offer is certainly the way that things are going. In terms of fine bespoke products and artisan products for the consumers to enjoy from a food and beverage point of view, it just seems to get more creative every year. It's extraordinary. We're getting little garnishes of microgreens on our burgers now, instead of perhaps a Booker cash and carry bun and a frozen defrosted burger. Now it's these brioche buns are baked in E1 and shipped over across the country, and it's extraordinary.
We should be heartened by it, really, because as you pointed out at the top of today's episode, products like yours are driven by changing consumer tastes. So these changes that we're seeing in the high level that we're seeing being delivered by food and beverage providers at events is because, as a whole, as a nation, we're better with our food and drink now than we were 25, 30 years ago historically.
Yeah, absolutely. If you look at the amount of column inches dedicated to food and drink in newspapers and online now, compared to what it was 10 years ago, it's extraordinary. People have no shortage in thirst for knowledge about food and drink, and they're always looking for the next trend or looking to experience something that their friends have raved about.
The infrastructure at a festival, when an event is looking to deliver full bottles of wine, how do they actually cope with that physically from a chilling point of view? Have you had to also look at how bar operators can handle and deliver wine in a full-size bottle appropriately. So when you take the white wine, for example, have you had to work with them on ways to make sure that it's chilled correctly to be delivered? Are there ice buckets? Are there things that you would get in a restaurant that you can actually also deliver in a temporary event scenario?
Well, a lot of the larger events now rely on infrastructural support from either their national wholesaler or the brewer to provide chiller trucks on site, and there's a very sophisticated system of loading the products that will sit behind each bar on each of those trailers. And that's really interesting, because it means that the wine is kept at 4 degrees and then can be transferred to the bar operation site, really quite simply. They're light to deal with and unbreakable, so it's very easy to actually keep the temperature correct and deliver the wine in a way that I'd like to see it delivered.
And it's not going to be costing them anything extra. This sort of infrastructure is infrastructure that is likely to be on site anyway as part of the catering operation and part of the food and beverage operation.
Yes, it is. I work with over a dozen bar operators, and a lot of them are very sophisticated in the way that they handle stock management on site and move stock around where shortages occur, and that's really good. And the bar staff are beginning to get used to the idea, and they find it a very simple sale to make. Just handing over a full bottle of wine instead of decanting it into a plastic carafe or a jug, and the consumer not actually getting to handle the product itself. So everybody benefits from this format.
Are you able to track feedback at all? Because if you're supplying to a bar operator or who's then supplying onto the festival itself, how active can you be and how effective can you be in actually monitoring the consumer's response to your products when they've gone into a particular site?
Well, we're hoping that social media will be pretty active this summer. We're planning to supply over I think the tally is 87 festivals at the moment, and growing. So we expect to get the good, the bad, and the ugly comments back from people, and we really want to engage with them. And the reason we want to engage with them is because if we haven't quite got the wine styles right, then I can change them. That's the beauty of what we do. But the bar operators, I think, will be able to help us with good feedback. We've had some great comments, and we've actually had consumers get in touch with us after an event when they perhaps enjoyed a bottle of our wine, saying, "Oh, we got a caravan. It's the perfect thing for us to take away for a weekend. Can you send us a dozen bottles?" And so we get quite a lot of direct response from consumers like that, which is very heartening.
It's genuinely a fascinating area to talk about, because I think it's been overlooked for a long time. And the simple reality of being able to deliver full-sized wine bottles in a means that conforms with the standards that have to be adhered to by outdoor event operators, i.e. no glass, is something that is no doubt picking up for you and is starting to become and has become a very, very successful business. For those people listening to the podcast, we do urge you, if you subscribe via iTunes, hop over to eventindustrynews.co.uk and check out some pictures and the video of today's podcast, because Paul has kindly put a bottle on the table in front of us so that we can see just how realistic it looks, I suppose. And when I say realistic, I mean it looks no different to a bottle that you would pick up off a shelf in a wine merchant or a supermarket. If you've got any thoughts on this, on event hospitality in general, as I said, it's a topic that we've talked about a couple of times on Talking Events. Get in touch, tweet us at Talking Events. We'd love to hear from you, find out what your opinions are on it, and are there any examples of event organisers out there who are listening to the podcast who are embracing this higher level of product that we're now seeing work its way into outdoor events. For the time being, we should say a big thank you to our guest today, Paul Scaife from Event Wine Solutions. Paul, thanks for coming into the studio. And when I say the studio, what I mean is the 34th floor of the Shangri-La Hotel at the Shard, London. Words I didn't think I'd say at any point in my life. But Paul, thank you for joining us.
You're welcome.
For the time being, my name is James Dixon, and you've been listening to Talking Events.